I talk about Five Nights at Freddy's, and especially the internet culture that surrounds it, a lot on this channel. But recently, I was browsing Netflix and I saw this series called The Amazing Digital Circus. I'd heard of it before. I knew that the pilot blew up YouTube, I knew that the finale had just come out, and I knew that it was created by Gooseworks, who is, of course, someone with a very funny name. So I binged the whole thing, and I had some mixed opinions on it. Then, it was brought to my attention that there's a lot of crossover between the audience who like FNAF and the audience who like The Amazing Digital Circus. And a lot of my audience like FNAF. I enjoy ranking things, I enjoy banging on about my opinions, my subscribers will hopefully be into it too, so let's do it! Let's rank every episode. This video was made possible by my maximum macro minions. 1. Non-binary Sun, Clash Pigs MK1, Instant Ball, Solar Drill, and Atomic. If you want to become a true macro minion and unlock some exclusive perks of the channel, including early access to videos, custom emoji to use in the chat, the option to get me to react to songs of your choosing, and more, then you see that join button that's on my channel page? Yeah, hit that. Also, you can use the chapters to jump around if there's a specific song you want to get to. You know, skip to whatever you want. Don't worry viewers who only like my FNAF song rankings, those are still happening of course, and I'll be reacting to every DA Games FNAF song live, probably on Monday the 13th of July, so subscribe if you don't want to miss that. Right, enough talking about clowns, marionettes and purple rabbits. Let's talk about clowns, marionettes, and of course, purple rabbits. In 9th place, episode 9, the finale. Remember, this episode, like all things Digital Circus seemingly, has had some real vitriolic hate thrown its way. Some people despise this episode, and while I think, as with a lot of things online, the pure hatred is very much overblown, I do see where the detractors are coming from. So, up until this point in the series, oh, spoilers by the way for the whole show, But, up until this point in the series, Jax had clearly been shown to be hiding something about themselves, and this is the episode where we finally find out what. To me, and probably to most people, they'd always come across as someone with major trouble letting people in, someone with a serious lack of self-love and self-worth, and that always felt tied in some way to their now abstracted friend, Ribbit. So what do we discover in this episode? Well, we discover that with Ribbit, Jax had trouble letting her in, and had a lack of self-worth and self-love. This, in part, stemmed from the fact that they're probably trans, or at least have some sort of masculinity problems and mummy issues as well, which is fine, but we're learning very little new information about Jax as a character. The show spends basically the first half of the episode, which is 100% longer than a normal one, by the way, revealing that the character we already knew had some trouble letting people in due to some sort of self-hatred, had trouble letting people in due to some sort of self-hatred. Past trauma doesn't necessarily make a character interesting, but how they respond to that past trauma can. This show had been setting up a reveal about who Jax really is for episode upon episode now, with Pomni really trying to understand him. And when she finds out the truth, she discovers Jax is basically the exact same character we've been watching this entire time. There's essentially no change in how Jax's character is presented to be seen. Yes, when they're with Pomni, Jax clearly has a lot of guilt over basically causing Ribbit to die. And you can essentially work this out before the finale. But when they were with Ribbit, Jax clearly had a lot of guilt over basically causing his mum to maybe die. You see what I'm saying here? What part of Jax's character are we actually learning about? That being said though, in terms of Jax, it was pretty sad that he abstracted. I thought the cut from him walking away to his abstracted form was pretty gut-wrenching. And while I wasn't too sad about his abstraction as such, especially from the later reveal that the human version of him is happy and healthy, seeing Pomni so sad about it did make me sad. Kane's turn is also pretty strange. The previous episode went to lengths to build him up as a villain, and in this episode, he just becomes good. He doesn't really go through any character growth. He just sort of decides that he wants to be nice to the humans. So then he takes out the blue AI from out his head, which is an element that's never really made clear to us, and then just makes sure that all the humans have a lovely fun time. He essentially invites them all to become co-ringleader with him, which is in such stark contrast to the character that we saw he was the episode before. And then there's what I would consider the biggest reveal. Pomni, Ragatha, Kinga, Zubul, Gangle, Jax, Kothmo, all the others, all of them aren't humans in the way we assumed. Or at least in the way I assumed. It seems their human counterparts underwent brain scans that got used as, I presume, AI training data for Kane, and he turned those scans into characters to inhabit his world. So for instance, Abby, the human version of Pomni, has just been going about her normal life this whole time, while a clone of her consciousness has been stuck in this digital prison, which means that these characters literally don't have a way to leave. There is no body that they can go back to. I'd assumed that the real human bodies of all of these digital consciousnesses were hooked up to the machine somewhere, like in the Matrix. But no, they're more like the horrific cookies from Black Mirror, if anything. And yet, somehow, all our main characters are just fine with that. We see in the end credits that they go off on infinite digital adventures, while still holding on to memories of their human lives. And everyone's happy? Imagine you, yes, you, woke up in the digital circus and you worked out that you're just a digital clone in a digital world, despite having real memories of your friends, your family, your pets, your actual humanity. Even if the computer world is fun, you would naturally long to go back to the real world. That said, I do really appreciate that this episode ended the show with such little ambiguity. Nearly every question gets answered. And while I don't love every single answer, obviously, at least they committed to wrapping it all up properly. This episode ensured that the Amazing Digital Circus didn't feel cut short, or that it ended in an unsatisfying way, in the sense that this really does feel like the story Gooseworks wanted to tell. And you know, just from this episode alone, that this is the end of it. By the way, I recently set a challenge to my glorious viewers, which was to see if we could go from 7,000 to 8,000 subscribers before the end of June, and we smashed that with time to spare, and I'm incredibly grateful to all of you. But now, we've got an even bigger challenge. I think we can hit 10,000 subscribers before the end of the summer. So if you want to be part of the Macrocosmic Militia, hit that button so we can hit our goal, please. In 8th place is episode 5, which has the title of Untitled. This one, as the name of the episode implies, isn't really about anything. The Amazing Digital Circus sets up a series structure very early on, telling us to expect wacky episodic adventures that could take place anywhere with any genre. After doing the episodic adventures properly in episode 2, 3 and 4, it already feels like they've given up on it by the time we get to episode 5. The gimmick of episode 5 is instead a quick fire round of different locales that are either pretty interesting but don't actually stick around long enough to really affect the plot at all, or do stick around for longer and end up being pretty bland, with the characters just talking in a few relatively uneventful locales. And that talking, you know, the character stuff, I'd argue, is done better in episodes before and after this one. The character development that does happen here doesn't feel like much, or like it's that important in the grand scheme of things. I think my biggest issue with it is just how it really does seem like Gooseworks gave up on the episodic adventures concept here and came up with this quickfire concept as a pretty poorly disguised way to try and hide that. I do like the reoccurring disappearing guy joke though. Oh, say. And I'd rather this episode exist than not exist. I don't hate it by any means, it's just the most filler episode of the whole series. If you had to cut one episode out entirely, I'd choose this one, as it'd probably have a pretty minute impact on the show. In 7th place is episode 4, Fast Food Masquerade. This one's clearly an attempt to spend proper time characterising Gangle, and while I do like that an attempt is being made somewhat to spend time characterising everyone in this show, this just doesn't quite click for me. Gangle's whole thing is that the masks she wears, which display different emotions, don't actually dictate what she's feeling. they just mask her feelings. So when she's wearing her tragedy mask, she presents herself as morose, and when she's wearing her comedy mask, she presents herself as more upbeat. You get the idea. But if she really wants to, she's fully capable of showing a full range of emotions, regardless of which mask she's got on. The problem is, that arc doesn't really pay off in this episode. If anything, that payoff happens in the finale, in episode 9, when she finally cries real tears instead of presenting herself as sad with the fake tears of her mask. But that leaves this episode feeling a bit unfinished in terms of the main character's arc. The rest of the cast are just off doing their own jobs in the legally distinct McDonald's, and everyone ends up with their own little vignettes that don't really relate to one another. That structure hurts Pomni the most out of everyone, as it's the first time she's relegated to side character, and I think she works much better as the lead. On the plus side, I like seeing Gummy Goo come back. I like the stupid sauce Ragatha accidentally starts tripping off of, and the orb guy is a fun addition too.
What?
Honestly, this is one of the funnier episodes of the series, and Gangle's arc does properly get started here, but there are just issues that hold it back. In 6th place is episode 8, Hudj Suk Lud Fuhul. The first time I watched this, it genuinely felt like an additional act that had been stapled onto one of the better episodes, that being episode 7, the beach episode, and it turns out that's pretty much exactly what happened. The original plan was that episodes 7 and 8 were going to be one single episode, but the decision was made to split them into their own separate things. Gooseworks has stated that episode 7 underwent a big rewrite so it could stand as its own thing, but there's nothing to suggest that the same care went into making this episode, episode 8, stand alone. And you can tell. For one thing, this is just the first episode where they've just fully given up making excuses for why they've stopped doing the episodic adventure format. They did the adventures properly in episodes 2, 3 and 4, pretty half-heartedly in 5, 6 and 7, and here they just don't even attempt it. Another way you can tell that this wasn't made to stand alone properly is that episode 7 had a beginning, middle and an end. This one feels like an extended prologue of that superior episode. Yeah, I was going to say though, one bit I liked was when Jax had to take Kane to the restaurant to distract him, and I even wrote that into the script, but then I remembered that didn't happen in this episode. It was from bloody episode 7, which kind of proves my point about how blurred together these two episodes feel. That said, this one absolutely still has its moments. I like the torture scenes and the dance numbers Kane puts everyone through. This really is the Kane episode, completely and utterly. It's cool to see him as a proper villain, and the race for Kinger to fix the code, which ends up just deleting Kane instead, was genuinely pretty tense. Is this episode bad? No, it's just not very memorable, because it doesn't feel like episode 8, it feels like episode 7, 2. That said, I do really like episode 7, and I'll be talking about it later. So if you are going to be similar to another episode, you know, at least this one is similar to a very good episode. In 5th place, episode 2, Candy, Carrier, Chaos. This one sits right in the middle for good reason. It's a very solid, standard episode of the show, and that really is a compliment. Pilot episodes are really important to get right, but arguably episode 2s are almost just as important, because this isn't the episode where you introduce your audience to this brand new world. This is the episode where we see what a normal day in that world actually looks like. And you can't pull out the crazy, shocking, deconstructive, rule-breaking, season-ending stuff here. You've got to save that stuff for later. Episode 2 just has to be a solid, normal episode of your show, and this is a great example of how to do that properly. Gummy Goo is a really good addition, I want him as a plush, and his arc this episode works so well because of how it builds on Pomni. He realises that he's essentially just an NPC stuck in a simulation, and Pomni helps him through that crisis for 2 reasons. 1, she's already been through her own version of a very similar mind-breaking realization since arriving in the circus in episode 1, so she very much gets what he's going through. And 2, it's just a great showcase of her naturally compassionate character, a trait that runs through the whole series, most obviously in how hard she keeps trying to connect with Jax. I'm also glad Pomni's really the only one of the main cast to be given proper emphasis here. Up to this point, the rest of the characters have all been fairly wacky, and a bit indistinguishable from one another, given how fast-paced the show has been at this point. So it makes sense to put the focus on the one character we actually know well and flesh her out further before the show starts shedding light on everyone else. Really, the only reason this isn't higher up is because it is by design quite standard, which is something that episode 2s just have to do.
Wait, what?
In fourth place is episode 1, the pilot. A pilot episode that genuinely blows up the internet the way this one did must be doing something right. It's just a great introduction to the world and the characters of the Amazing Digital Circus. Even if the personalities of everyone don't stand out to you hugely on a first watch, the peak character designs absolutely will do, so it's really easy for a first-time viewer to pick a favourite straight away. Pomni's well written and the story's structured nicely too, with her desire to escape acting as the A-plot and the episode's adventure sitting underneath it as the B-plot. I did criticise other episodes earlier for abandoning that episodic adventure structure, but the pilot's an exception I'll happily excuse, because it's far more important here to establish what the audience point of view character is actually longing for, which at this point is escape. Something literally any audience member would also long for in her position. You know, before anyone even needs to start worrying about that adventure of clearing up the gloinks. It's a great pilot, and it does exactly what a great pilot should do, which is get people to keep watching. It doesn't rank any higher, purely because by nature it has to be pretty simple, like episode 2, and you've got to establish the rules of your show here before you're later allowed to start breaking them. And it's usually when a show starts breaking its own conventions that you get the best episodes. Also, that closing scene with the music sting is honestly one of my favourite moments in the whole show. Something that the Amazing Digital Circus does well as a whole is the really great and really memorable score. And I also love the animation and the character design. Those are consistently some of the strongest parts of the show for me. I do think the script, generally pretty great as it is, occasionally strays into what I'd call American millennial internet user territory.
Weren't we kind of bonding over being chaotic evil together?
And the voice acting, which again is generally great, occasionally can become a bit American theater kid.
Daisy, give me your answer.
Are you seriously gonna start singing that?
But overall, I'd still say it's a great show, and this is a great episode. In third place, episode 3, The Mystery of Mildenhall Manor. There are some actually quite scary moments to be found here. The quote-unquote angel has some really scary design to it, and Mr. Mildenhall has some creepy lore to himself. This is also the episode where it becomes increasingly clear how much the animation of the show has already improved since the pilot, which actually looks pretty rough in comparison, though not actually bad at all by any means. The adventure structure of the series is really at its peak in this episode. It's got that manic, Amazing Digital Circus adventure feel for most of the story that puts on the brakes somewhat for some genuinely nice character depth in the last act, and it was a smart choice to sideline every character except Pomni and Kinga here. Kinga here. This was actually the first episode that made me properly like the characterization of anyone who wasn't Pomni. As I've said before, up to this point, the rest of the cast had the character traits of wacky, but they hadn't evolved to have that many other traits at this point, so it's nice to finally give Kinga some space to have some lucid moments and become somewhat of a father figure to Pomni. I do like that most of the characters went through the nice door in the haunted mansion, and it really did just lead to a nice dinner party. It's a fun contrast to Pomni and Kinga, who were literally in hell at the time. There's also a B-plot revolving around Zubul not liking her body, which is an interesting concept, though I would like to have seen it developed a bit further in the series as a whole. In second place, it's the one episode I talked about really liking earlier, the beach episode, aka episode 7. Again, the trend of the episodic adventure concept essentially getting dropped does rear its ugly head here, as the characters are at the beach for maybe like the first 2 minutes, but that's easy to forgive because the rest of the episode is so good. I love seeing the main cast finally trying to escape the circus properly. The introduction of Abel was a great addition, and the reveal that it was all just another orchestrated adventure from Kane, and this was a way that would never let them leave, was honestly kind of sad. The reason the plot lands so well for me here is that every single character actually has a goal they want to achieve. Yes, Jax only helps reluctantly, but they do help, and this really does feel like it's where the main characters have the most agency they've really ever had in this series. In most episodes, Kane tends to send them somewhere like a spooky mansion and says, "Oh, your quest is to do X, Y, and Z," and the characters basically respond with an, okay. But here, they're all genuinely active in going after something they want, and you feel that the whole way through. In terms of pure plot, this might actually be the best episode of the whole series. Parts I like in this episode include when Jax had to take Kane to the restaurant to distract him. I like the tension at the end to press the right button, tension that Jax very much cracked under. I like the general level of unease that Abel was making some of the other characters feel, and I loved local baddie Ragatha at the beach. Hey, who put that in the script? I also really liked what is, to all intents and purposes, a smiling friends joke at the start of the episode.
Dude, no, they took everything! That was my entire life savings, dude!
And in first place, episode 6, they all get guns. A really fun episode, right from the concept. The character pairings work really nicely here. It's always great to see Kinga's lucid moments, and Ragatha's whole shtick, being such a people pleaser to the point where nobody actually really likes her, is handled really well throughout the entire ep. Zubul and Gangle bond in a nice way too. Zubul embraces the hand she was dealt by sticking multiple arms into her weird body and by using those arms to shoot a lot of guns. Gangle achieves her ultimate goal of firing a Tommy gun by putting her trust in her friend Zubul to keep her comedy mask safe until she was ready to shoot. Although it looks like it probably didn't matter what mask she was wearing. Jax and Pomni's dynamic is at its absolute best in this episode. Jax teaches Pomni to look at things from his perspective, to treat their life a bit more like a game, and it genuinely does grow her a bit as a person. As I'd argue, this is when she starts to let go of her human inhibitions and becomes more confident in the weird world she's trapped in. Their confrontation at the end is so well done, easily the best part of the whole episode, and frustrating in exactly the right way. You can't help but be on Pomni's side, willing Jax to just let her in. The character awards at the end are a good cap to the whole thing too. I love the bathroom scene with Jax, and it really did seem like they were building up the mystery of who Jax really is. Which did have a disappointing payoff later, but that's not this episode's fault. The only real issue is that it's the second episode in a row where Kane openly admits he couldn't be bothered coming up with a proper adventure, which is a habit that continued after this episode too. Overall, this is the best combination of plot and character the show has to offer. This is a really great episode, in what is, all in all, a really great show. Or should I say, an amazing show. Well, I hoped you liked my rankings of this really fun and unique show, guys. If you disagree with what I've said, just remember that this really is just my opinion, and it's totally normal for people to differ in their opinions. It's normal, but it's not right. Any opinion other than mine is sacrilege. My views, and mine alone, deserve to be etched into the communal fabric of humanity and upheld as moralistic law.
I understand you might disagree with me, but just know that if you do, I think you're nothing. The Macrocosmic channel is the only place anybody should come for the right opinions.
And now it's time to thank my channel members. Thanks to all of my YouTube channel members for making this video happen, including my medium macro minions, and of course, my maximum macro minions. 1. Non-binary Sun, Clash Pigs MK1, Instant Bull, Solar Drill, and Atomic. You can hit that join button to get a bunch of exclusive perks from my channel, but if you don't want to support me that way, that is of course completely fine. We are trying to hit 10,000 subscribers before the end of the summer, so that would be a really great way to support me, and of course you would officially join the ranks of the Macrocosmic Militia. Now, the only thing that's left for me to say is bye.